A Night at the Opera continued. I didn't mind the drive from the restaurant to the theater. It felt good to have the window down even a little bit, clear out some of the wine and food fog. Bob put his hand over mine on the console and I glanced at him. "So what made you decide on the opera?" I asked. "I didn't even think you liked opera. Don't you call it controlled screeching or something like that?" Bob laughed. "Yeah, I'm not a big fan, but this is supposed to be a good show. Romeo and Juliet, you know," he added with a wink. "Oh, geez. Right, that definitely describes us, star-crossed lovers," I laughed. "Well, the lead guy, singer, whatever you call them, is supposed to be really something, the next big deal. I hear he's real famous in Italy. I guess that's where he's from originally, but he lives here in Houston now." I replied. "What's his name?" "I don't remember off the top of my head. You can Google him on your phone if you want, I guess." "Right. Okay." I got out my phone out of my purse, pulled up Google on my internet app, and typed in Romeo and Juliet Houston Opera Lead, and saw the billing showed some blurb about an amazing tenor performer as a guest performer from Italy. "He's named Antonio Conti," I announced, turning off my phone and tucking it away. "Sounds Italian to me," Bob replied. I rolled my eyes and poked him. "You're always so succinct," I laughed, shaking my head. Bob laughed and, patting my hand, turned on his left turn signal, and I saw the Wartem in front of us. The Wartem Theater really is one of the crown jewels of Houston. Entirely financed by private funds, their website lays out all the information you could possibly ever want to know about the place. I know. I had looked it up before I got in the shower. I'd always heard about the place, but had never paid much attention to it, being as it was so completely out of my range in both terms of finances and social standing. Bob and I having a night at the opera about was as unlikely as pigs flying. But there we were. Bob leaned over and gave me a soft kiss. "Let's go find out what all the fuss is about, shall we?" Let me just make one thing perfectly clear. I really do not care for opera. There, I've said it. I mean, I've really tried. I've been to 2 operas in my life, and I can honestly tell you that if the entire genre suddenly ceased to exist in my reality, I would be perfectly okay with that. I had the absolute hangover from hell. I don't know if it was the wine or the controlled screeching from the performance last night, but I felt awful. I knew for sure I had no intention of ever subjecting myself to that experience ever again. I mean, I guess most of the singers were all right, although I thought the girl who played Juliet looked way too old to be playing the part. But the main lead guy was really cute and didn't sound all that bad, considering the rest of the night, including fumbling, half-aroused attempts at sex before falling into the blackness of sleep. I guess you could say I was happy to have it in my history and not my future. I pushed Bob out the door, muttering something about how I needed to do laundry and groceries, and did he want me to help me out with that? It's the best way I know to get any man, out the door. I swear. I sighed as I locked the door after him, watching him get into his car and back out of the parking spot. The thought of groceries made me moan, so I decided laundry was my first priority. By the time I got done with laundry, back from groceries, and had everything folded, clothes, and put away, clothes and food, it was still only 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I had way too much time to do nothing. I didn't feel like hitting up the zoo again. I had managed to tamp down my headache to a dull throb, and I figured the macaws were entirely too much like opera singers. Maybe a walk around Bayou Park instead. Pigeons and robins were about my speed right about now. As big and beautiful as the park was, it still was only January, much too early to have any color or anything interesting in the foliage. I wandered the paths for a while, looking at different kinds of grass growing, feeling out of sorts. This was a waste of time. I got back to the car, started Joni up, and backed out, finding a break in the traffic and accelerating carefully into Sunday afternoon traffic on the Gulf Coast. I think every 2 heads I saw were either bald or gray. Little old ladies with their permed curls tied up against their heads, men with both hands firmly locked on the wheel at 10 and 2 as they stared straight ahead of them. Maybe I needed a nap. I drove along Braeswood, just letting myself get lost in the road's meandering, winding turns. Eventually, I needed to be heading north, so I turned onto Harbin Boulevard to pick up the 90. Just as I was coming into the T intersection, I glanced to my left at a large complex of buildings behind an industrial metal fence. A small sign on the corner read, Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences. How I had not ever noticed that before, I will never know. The right thing to do. No one had asked him to do it. It just felt like the right thing to do. This was his standard response when Renardo would come across people during the day as he wandered through the park, picking up the trash they left behind. Old soda, beer and water bottles and cans went into a separate bag. Those were money. The rest of the garbage was usually some kind of plastic bag or other debris and cigarette butts. The cigarette butts he had a harder time sorting. Was there a lot of lipstick on the filter? Probably better in the trash. A nice inch or so of actual cigarette left? Definitely tucked away secretly in a Sucrets tin can he had carried with him for decades. He wasn't a big man, nor was he a small man. He wasn't fat or thin, although it was hard to tell with all the layers of clothes he wore in the winter. It was equally difficult to tell how old he was, and if you asked him, he'd say he stopped counting birthdays a long time ago. He didn't get around as well as he used to, so he suspected he was more old than he was young. Renardo knew people thought he was stupid, lazy, or something, and that used to bother him a lot until he realized he just enjoyed picking up the trash they tossed aside. As he would deposit one full bag of actual trash into one of the many trash cans located throughout the park, he took the opportunity to skim through the contents of the trash people had actually managed to throw away. He was constantly amazed at the things people would get rid of. Clothes that had absolutely nothing wrong with them except maybe a small hole or a missing button. He'd even found a pair of Adidas that were just the barest bit worn, and it fit him perfectly. That had been an outstanding day. He glanced down at that same pair of Adidas, faithfully getting him from one trash can to another in relative comfort and ease. He was truly blessed. He didn't go outside the park on his trash collecting expeditions very often, but there wasn't a lot laying around the main park this early in the morning on a weekday. He knew there were kids that hung out in the quarry next to the park, especially in the older abandoned sections. Stupid kids always threw good stuff away. Bottles that still had water, soda, or even beer, no matter that it was flat and stale. Half-eaten bags of soggy chips, spilled peanuts and sunflower seeds, not to mention the occasional earbuds or half-full pack of cigarettes. His stomach started reminding him that peanuts were perfectly acceptable for breakfast, and his body immediately headed towards this possible location of sustenance. Of course, what his body wanted and what it was capable of after however many years of living on the streets was something else entirely. He shuffled along, content to make his slow and steady way to his destination. All things in good time, he began chanting softly to himself, each syllable a deliberate sliding forward of one foot, followed by the other foot, the Adidas well worn to this mode of travel by now. He came around the back corner of one of the most popular spots for the kids to hang out and paused, considering a black plastic trash bag lying half under the scrub brushes. These kinds of finds were problematic. Sometimes people threw their pets in the bags and dumped them out here. Those were never pleasant bags to open. But other times, a Goodwill bag would be left out here, maybe on purpose, to let people like him find them. Who knew? It was a puzzle, and that was a fact. What to do? Keep on going, or check it out? He stepped a bit closer, peering into the shadows under the bush to see if there was any information to be gleaned there. The bag looked like it had been maybe more completely buried at one time, and that perhaps some wild dogs or coyotes had been investigating it. He knew they were out there. He'd seen their scat. It wasn't the same as the poop left by dogs that ate kibble and slept all day. He ducked his head and looked closer at what might have been some fur or something that had been uncovered and partially pulled out of the bag. He saw pale skin and dark hair. "What the?" he yelled as he caught his breath and stumbled back, losing his balance and landing hard on his left hip. "Ow! God damn it, son of a bitch! Down, 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 down!" he gasped, trying to scoot backwards and stand back up. That hurt, goddammit! Finally, after backwards crab walking far enough so that he could lean forward and shove himself upright, he shuffled sideways, turning back, and then speed slid his feet forward as fast as he could towards the first house next to the park.